Welcome back everyone, and this is probably going to be the last of the Cyberpunk 2077 videos that we make. And since there's already at this point several videos out there showing you a huge hierarchy of graphics card performance and where each card lies in performance, what we want to do in this video today is we're going to take our existing test bench, which is on the screen now, which has a Ryzen 9 5900X, and we're going to go through various graphics cards and we're going to find what it takes to hit 60 frames per second at a given resolution with a couple different settings, and then we're going to move into, well, what you can do to mitigate some performance, to gain some performance back, and how ray tracing performance is in this game, because it's quite intense, as well as the game itself. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump into seeing what it's going to take to run 1080p with the low preset and hit 60 FPS, because I'm pretty sure the numbers that CD Projekt Red gave on the boxes, well, I think they were targeting a 30 FPS number on those. But 1080p low, 60 FPS, we're going to kick things off with the Radeon side of things, and it's going to take you at least the RX Vega 56 or the RX 5500 XT, which seems like a really weird thing. And at no point in this am I saying that typically is the RX 5500 XT 8GB as fast as a Vega 56, but in this title, to hit 1080p 60 FPS at low preset, you're going to need either one of those. RX 580, 590 gets close, I would imagine. The 580 didn't get quite close enough, but knowing the performance disparity there, the 590 could have gotten a fair bit closer, but you're going to need at least the Vega 56 for this one, or that RX 5500 XT, which shows, you know, baby Navi's doing pretty good. On the GeForce side, you're going to need either the GTX 1070 or the GTX 1660. Now that's the regular 1660, not the Super, so either one of those is going to break that 60 FPS mark. 1060 doesn't even come close. It's much like the 580, only a little bit slower. Now the GTX 1650 was a close call, but it wasn't quite there. It never got above a consistent average of 60 FPS in our benchmark run that we did. Now, what about 1080p high settings? We want 1080p high? Well, on Radeon, that's going to cost you the RX 5700. The 5600 XT just couldn't quite pull it. It was staying closer to 50 FPS through our run, whereas the 5700 stayed just above that 60 FPS mark. On the GeForce side of things, you can get away with the RTX 2060 or maybe the GTX 1080 Ti. See, the 1080 wasn't quite hitting it, and the 1080 Ti is a fair bit faster than the 1080. However, I don't have a 1080 Ti on hand to validate that, so that's why I said maybe a 1080 Ti. But definitely the RTX 2060 will get you over that 60 FPS at 1080p high. Now, if you want to go to 1440p, that's where things are going to get quite tricky and expensive in this game. So for the Radeon side, you're going to need the RX 6800. Now, I know what you're thinking. Keith, the performance gap between the 5700 series and the 6800 series is significant. It is, but the only thing that really occupies that space in there is going to be the Radeon 7. I don't have one, and judging by what I can see by looking at other reviews, especially Hardware Unboxed, shows the Radeon 7 is right there with the 5700 XT, and neither one of them are breaking that 60 FPS at 1080p or 1440p rather. It's going to take that RX 6800. Now on the GeForce side, you can use the RTX 2080 Super or the RTX 3060 Ti. It's going to take either one of those to break that 60 FPS. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because if you have the RTX 2060 and you've got DLSS enabled at quality settings, you're going to break it. You'll be able to get 1440 at high settings over 60 FPS. Now, what about 4K? It's almost a joke, because none of the cards that I have in my test suite break 4K 60 FPS at high settings. You can get there. You can get to 60 FPS if you do one of two things. So if you're running something like the 6800 or 6900 XT from AMD, if you utilize Fidelity FX Dynamic Cast. So that's something new to this title. It's very new. It's very cool that they did this. So it takes the Fidelity FX Cast system, so contrast adaptive sharpening, and it allows you to set a dynamic resolution. So you can set your target resolution as, of course, 100%, and then you can set a minimum resolution that you would, or minimum internal resolution slider downwards, and if you set it to 80% and you set the game to 60 FPS, you'll be able to get 60 FPS at 4K. Now, admittedly, the internal resolution will dynamically drop, so it is there. However, if you're running an NVIDIA card, you can enable DLSS, and all it takes is quality mode on the RTX 3080 to break that 60 FPS mark at 4K at high settings. And it does look considerably better than the Fidelity FX Dynamic CAS option. However, that CAS option can be applied to other resolutions as well. So if you have a card that is on the verge of hitting that 60 FPS mark and you're okay with letting that internal resolution kind of dither a bit, so you can take the 580 and you can go to 75% as the minimum with 60, and you're going to be able to hit that 60 FPS mark with the 580, and the same thing with the 1060. Of course, you may have to adjust it a little bit more or less based on those, but you do have this option in the game to allow for that internal resolution to drop, and it will be it'll be noticeable. You'll be able to tell. It'll get a much softer image. But if you apply Radeon image sharpening or NVIDIA's sharpening filter through their Freestyle, you could recover a bit of that sharpness. So that's definitely something you may want to consider if you're having trouble hitting 60 FPS. Now, on to something else, ray tracing. So this game does support ray traced up to global illumination. The lighting is a little bit wild here in this one, but you have ray traced shadows from the sun, and then you have reflections being kind of the biggest one here. So if you want to run 1080p ray tracing enabled and hit that 60 FPS, I don't say 70, but 60 FPS target, you're going to need either a 2080 Super or an RTX 3060 Ti. Now, you can get away with it on lower cards if you start to get into using performance or ultra performance, but I personally limit myself to quality settings on DLSS when we do these tests. So you're going to need one of those two cards. Now, if you move up to 1440p, you're going to have to step up to using an RTX 3080 if you're going to want that smooth 60 plus FPS. But again, you're still using quality DLSS to get there. 4K, that's just mean in this one. 4K with ray tracing enabled all the way across the board is going to be super intense. You're going to have to get picky with it, and you're going to have to be okay with really sub 60 FPS frame rates. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is what's the minimum card that you're going to need to hit 60 FPS at a given resolution and setting. Now, can you run other cards? Yeah, just because I said a 6800 at 1440p for 60 doesn't mean you can't run a 6900 XT, and you can't run a 3080 or a 3090 rather. So it's minimum. If you got something more powerful than these cards, then you're going to be able to crank the settings. So like, for example, 1080p high settings, you got a 5700. If you got the 5700 XT, guess what? You're going to get better than that. You're not going to get 1440p at 60 FPS, but you know, hopefully this gives you a quick reference for which resolution, which card you need to hit at those. If you got a better card, you'll be good to go. It's up to you. Like to know what you think about this type of coverage. Do you like us doing this for the video game coverage? It's kind of fun, very different take. Not quite the same thing where you just get hit with numbers and we say, here's the FPSs, have fun. But would love to hear your thoughts down below. Tell me something, if you're playing Cyberpunk 2077, how has your experience been so far? Are you okay with the performance? Are you getting good performance? If so, let us know what hardware you're using. Love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. This has been Keith with WCCF Tech TV. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all those things. Catch you in the next video.